Well, hello. How nice to be with all of you again. It has been some time. So I feel the pleasure and the privilege of being back with this robust, so kind IMC 7 a.m. Sangha. Great gratitude to Gil for inviting me back. This week, as you might see, the theme will be the Pāramīs, the perfections. I saw these recently described as the noble qualities that are accompanied by compassion and skillful means. So we'll talk quite a bit about the Pāramīs over the next 5 days. But first, let's meditate. And the focus of this meditation will be the first Pāramī of generosity. So even as we're taking the posture, giving the posture, setting up the posture, calling in generosity, giving. The support that's given by the seat holding us up. The relaxation of the face as we close the eyes. Maybe rolling and aligning the shoulders. And a few deep breaths, really connecting with this body. This body that accompanies us through so much. Settling in. Is there something in the posture that expresses an attitude of generosity, the kind way we regard the spine? Or let the belly loosen. The space we give for the breathing to come in and out, rather than controlling the breath. something you may experiment with, just to see if you tend to meditate with your hands, palms down. See if it taps into any of your generosity to turn them up. Open palms, open-handed. That gesture of giving and receiving. Not only generous with the body, generous with the mind and mental activity. What kind of attitude am I bringing to distraction, wandering, or to the senses, the sounds that are just coming and just going, the sensations, emotions, whatever is coming? Can that too be regarded with an open generosity? By this time, some of the needs or impulses of the body or the habits of the mind may be making themselves known. Welcome, dear friend. Have some tea. Stay as long as you like. Is there some way that a generous welcoming or hospitality allows a stillness to accompany the movement? And for these last minutes of the sitting, if the attitude of generosity has been favoring the side of giving, how now with the side of receiving? Maybe it's receiving the support of what's outside of you, community, even your chair. Maybe receiving something inside, your intention to practice, or the results of this half hour of sitting. Any little buds of goodness. So a minute just to receive with generosity. Thank you very much, everyone. Hello again. I suspect we had some folks join while we were sitting. To reintroduce myself, my name is Kodo. Very, very happy to be here with the 7 a.m. Sangha. Thanks to Gil for the invitation. And the topic for the week is the 10 Pāramīs, the 10 perfections. Thanissaro Bhikkhu, well-known teacher, introduces them this way. He says, the 10 perfections, or Pāramīs, are the Buddhist teachings that are probably the most useful for bringing the path of awakening into everyday life. They're a list of qualities that you can develop in any situation, he says, as you're working, with your family, at home, at the office, as you're driving, as you're meditating. And the qualities are these. So, generosity, virtue. Third, renunciation. Fourth, discernment or wisdom. Fifth, persistence or energy. Sixth is patience. Seventh is truth. Eighth, determination, resolve. Ninth, goodwill. And 10, equanimity. So the word Pāramī relates to the word Pāramām, which means something of foremost importance. And it really got my attention that Thanissaro Bhikkhu says that these are the most useful for bringing the path into everyday life. How many of us wonder how best to do that? So I remember when I first encountered these teachings, I was practicing at a Burmese Dharma center here in the US. And what I heard was that for the practice to ripen in awakening, that is, for the practice to develop into just the sort of freedom that I was looking for, the teaching was that all of these paramis needed to be sufficiently developed. And I thought, oh, I thought this was all about concentration. I thought this was all about meditation or mindfulness. But what this opened up for me is the opportunity that any moment whatsoever in the day could be a moment for practice. And you can hear the broad application if you hold this in mind as I list them again. So giving, ethics, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, resolve, goodwill, and equanimity. So the plan for the week is to discuss the Pāramīs in pairs. And why is that? In part because 10 Pāramīs divided by 2 equals 5 days. Also, one of my hopes is that because we discuss 2 Pāramīs each day, 2 perfections each day, that we can see something about how one wholesome quality is supportive of another wholesome quality. To say this another way, one wholesome quality brings others along in the way we talk about in the suttas, right view being the forerunner. One way in this regard that I think about the Pāramīs is you might know someone who has a good friend that brings out the best in them. One good quality brings out the good qualities in another. One of the ways the Pāramīs are talked about is like each one being a bucket that's being filled with water, just drip, 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 drip by drip, slowly, patiently. And because these Pāramīs mutually support, you might think of all these 10 buckets like very closely together. And when the water of one fills up, it spills over into the next. Our giving supports our virtue. Our renunciation supports our wisdom. And so what can I say? Practitioners have been making sense of and relating to the Buddhist teachings for a long time. And that means a lot has been said. So I like to relate to one specific teaching that can represent the practitioners of a specific time. So a lot of what I'm going to say this week is inspired by reflections on a text called the Treatise on the Pāramīs by Acharya Dhammapala. All that I'll say about Dhammapala, other than being prolific, is that to me, he seems like someone who did the very hard work of reflecting on his tradition in such a way that he could respond skillfully to his times. And that way, he sort of reminds me of the Dalai Lama. So the application of the Pāramīs is every day. It can be in all sorts of things. And the tradition regards the great potential of these practices as nothing short of complete awakening, actually of Buddhahood. So let's begin with some of the basic principles of the Pāramīs that will apply to a discussion of all of them. We'll hear these sorts of things all week. First is that the Pāramīs, the perfections, they're both practices and they're virtues. So they are both actions, things we can do, and they are the results, say the sort of tendencies, the qualities that arise over time as the basis of those practices. So Pāramīs can be both. We practice giving to develop generosity. We become ethical by practicing ethical conduct, and so on. What's something that's beautiful about the Pāramīs being both a practice and a virtue, practices and virtues, is that we're allowed, is that the right word? That's not exactly right. But we get to practice them imperfectly. We get to practice as best we can, and we can trust that this is developing something beautiful in us. We practice renunciation imperfectly, but we're growing in the skill, growing in the tendency. So as Dhammapala says, the Pāramīs, they're noble qualities, which is giving, renunciation, etc., accompanied by compassion and skillful means, and when mature, untainted by craving, conceit, and views. Here we hear again how skillful qualities bring each other along. The skillful qualities of compassion, the skillful qualities of skillful means, which is a form of wisdom, a form of discernment, bringing along our generosity, maturing our generosity. Let's see. So let's say you hear the word perfections, and your first thought is, oh, great. Now I have to be perfect in these 10 ways in order to be a card-carrying practitioner. Let me say at the outset that is not what I'm hoping to emphasize or propose. Instead of perfections as measuring sticks that we have to say, oh, I must be perfect now, instead maybe consider that these can be 10 powerful reference points for wholesome growth. As if the Buddha and the teachers are saying, oh, look here, there may be something useful here to examine, practice, and reflect on. For example, in a very plain way, how's my generosity? Is that accessible to me? Is that something that lives in my life? What role does it play? And here's the part where we don't have to be perfect. You also reflect on the opposites. How's the opposite of generosity showing up in my life? And taking a real honest look and just seeing. It's almost like play, experimentation. What role does stinginess play in my life? Wow, check that out. So consider them, rather than demands of perfection, as these high leverage points, just like our meditation. We have this reference point of the breathing for many of us, or if it's another object, same works. We don't demand that the mind stay with the breathing 100% of the time. We get skilled instead of the process of attending to the breathing, seeing the mind wander, and the mind coming back. And we get skilled in this whole process. But all the while, we have this really useful reference point of the breathing or the body. So one of the keys that I'm going to emphasize throughout is that Dhammapala encourages, with all 10 of the Pāramīs, a certain method of reflection. And that is to reflect on the drawbacks of their opposites, and then to also reflect on the particular benefits of that quality. So you'll see this fleshed out as we go. But I want to emphasize this at the beginning, because this sort of reflection, what's the drawback, the hazard, the harm in the opposite of generosity versus the benefit of practicing generosity, to reflect in such a way is precisely where we will discover where the practice can live all over our life in so many situations. And it's also where we can start to notice the Pāramīs supporting one another. So just a couple of minutes on dana, paramita, giving. Dhammapala teaches that dana's function is to dispel greed for things that can be given away. And let's take up this approach. So the drawbacks that he talks about, we might recognize as the drawbacks of possession or clinging to our possessions, particularly the sort of worry that can generate. You can think about how we may have something that's quite dear to us, but it's subject to loss. We may have a beautiful teacup that's subject to breaking. Our possessions can not only spark clinging in us, but others may want them. They can give rise to conflict. They can even give rise to enemies, he says. Not in all cases, of course, but these are the possible drawbacks of clinging to our possessions. So we're meant to reflect on someone we can give our things away to as a best friend, someone who's helping me to rid myself of my possessions that I'm clung to, and also helping me to develop this opposite, the quality of generosity. So beneficial, on the other side, is the practice of giving, that we're encouraged to arouse joy in 3 cases. In the case of a dear person asking us for something, in the case of a neutral person asking us for something, and the case of a hostile person asking us for something. All 3 were meant to arouse joy. Because if a dear person asks us for something, we can arouse some joy on the basis of, oh, this one I care for so much is asking me for something, and I have the opportunity to give. If someone neutral to us, an acquaintance we might not know so well, asks us for something, we can arouse joy knowing that giving so often supports, develops a relationship. And I love this, encourages reflection on arousing joy based on a hostile person asking us for something. And this is the rationale that if he says, my foe is asking me for something, though he is hostile to me, by means of this gift, he will surely become my friend. I hope that's true. I hope so. In all 3 cases, arousing joy and also arousing loving kindness and compassion when we give. One good quality brings another along. So a few words about sila, virtue, the practice and the quality. The function, it's said, is blameless conduct. That's the ideal. That's where we're headed. And we practice it imperfectly. Dhammapala has a series of beautiful metaphors in order to communicate the power of sila, the power of the practice of sila. Things like a fragrance that pervades all directions, a staircase ascending to the heavens, a highway leading to Nibbana. And he says, even the waters of the Ganges cannot wash away the stain of hatred, but the water of virtue is able to do so. So he communicates the power of sila with these rich metaphors. And we can think for ourselves of the benefit of sila as a protection, as a basis for our own security. And one of the ways that sila and generosity supports each other is that when our sila, when our virtue is well developed, then we're said to give the gift of fearlessness to all beings. No one need fear or distrust me. So as an encouragement to bring the practice of the Pāramīs into the everyday, into your day-to-day, what I would suggest is to, for yourself, reflect upon, observe, and take note a few very, very straightforward questions. Where does giving, generosity, show up in my life today? And where does its opposite show up? Where do I notice that? What are the conditions for its arising? And do the same with virtue, ethical behavior. If you know the lists of the precepts or the 10 skillful actions, how does virtue play a role in my life? And where does its opposite show up? And it's, again, not for any sort of judgment or push toward perfection, that we're practicing the perfections, but right now, just play, experiment, get to know what is this mind? What is this heart? How does it manifest in the world? So we'll begin here, at the beginning of the session tomorrow. There may be some time to share in the chat what you found, and then we will proceed with the 3rd and the 4th Pāramīs, perfections, renunciation, and wisdom. Thanks so much for being here. It's a joy. See you in the morning.